Well, hello again. We're here for part three. We're going to talk about the formula and how state funding is allocated. But before we go into formula, we kind of stopped short last time and we didn't talk about the federal sources of revenue. Federal sources of revenue are, generally speaking, the smallest source of revenue that you will have in your school of the big three, which is local, state, and federal. The trick is to try to get this as big as you can. Okay? I think I told you last time that at one point in 2009, which is kind of what we're talking about here, the state average for local money was somewhere around 11 or 12, and I had gotten my school up to about 22% that year. So that's what you want to do. You want to write federal grants. You want to up that money as much as you can. You want to make sure your accounts are good in federal programs and things like that. Okay, so let's talk about federal programs. Federal programs kind of stem from our social consciousness that we had in the early 1960s. We decided that it was probably a good thing to have Head Start, and probably we thought that every kid should know how to read, and we thought that maybe they should be ready to come to school. So we started things like Head Start and stuff like that. So we did that kind of stuff, and it was great for schools. They never had money like that before. They didn't know what to do with themselves. So these were called title monies, and they've changed their names over the years. Title III became Title II-D, and Title I has changed a little bit. Title VI has changed, different things. But they're title funds, and they are tied to specific purposes, mostly remediation and enhancement. The thing to remember about these monies is you can supplement, you cannot supplant. So if you're supposed to be spending state monies on reading, you can't stop spending state monies on reading and just spend federal monies. Okay, you have to spend it in excess of that. That's just how it goes, and that's probably fair. Okay. Where it gets to not be fair is sometimes the rules overtake us and we do silly things. For example, in our state, a lot of administrators used to buy a lot of technology with title funds, Title I funds, Title II-D funds, Title III funds. They'd buy technology, but they wouldn't train their teachers to use the stuff. Okay, and so the feds got mad about that. They said, look, what good does having stuff help us if you don't know how to run it? Pretty logical. And yet their solution didn't work too great either. They would actually do a set-aside. You had to spend 25% of the money on training your people. Well, if I'm a small school and I don't have enough money to buy the stuff in the first place, it doesn't matter how much you make me set aside to train. Okay? But those are the kind of things that we deal with federal monies. And so schools, either the superintendent and principals get very good at that sort of thing, and they do well, or they don't get very good at it, and the schools suffer, which means the kids suffer. They don't get the things that they want. So my advice to you is get good at this stuff. Learn it. Get a mentor. Okay? Find somebody who knows how to do it and pick their brain for everything they're worth. I was fortunate. A guy I worked with was kind of the federal programs guy in my district, and he got very ill. He actually ended up passing away. He had inoperable cancer. And we didn't know this at the time, but he kind of did. And so he was took me under his wing. He was teaching me how to do impact aid, which has to do with tribal thing. It's a number of Native Americans in your school. It's the military people in your school. It's the where they live, and if they live on federal property and that sort of thing. It's an in lieu of tax type situation that it's a federal fund. Impact aid's a big deal. There's two different kinds of impact aid. There's live on, work on money, and then there is federal displacement money. There's federal land money. I had a district that had a bunch of land under Lake Texoma. And so we got some money for that because they didn't pay taxes on that. There wasn't anybody living on the land anymore because it was under Lake Texoma. And so we got money in lieu of that. Think of all the big military installations across the United States. They all get money from this. If the military installation was taken after 1939, they really get money from this. From that point, they didn't get it for the original base if it was there for 100 years, but they've gotten it for every expansion since then. Keep in mind, World War II was the biggest single expansion of federal property in American history. Okay, so big deal, lots of money. Air Force bases, Navy bases, things like that. Indian tribes, if they have acquired money since land since 1939, that's a big deal. Now, you can only count the land if it is equal to or larger than 10% of the evaluation in your district. Okay, I worked in a district that had every other acre in the district was trust land, but it was from prior to 1939, and so I didn't get any money for it unless somebody lived on it or worked on it. And then I got impact aid money. So impact aid is federal money. Title I is federal money. Title II is federal money. Title III is federal money. Any federal money that you get, you account for it a little bit differently. But it is still a revenue stream into your general fund. Okay? You have to spend it first and then draw it down. You get reimbursed for it. You don't just get a check for most federal money. Impact aid being the exception to that. But for most title money, federal money, you use it first and then you draw it down. Okay? All right. Other federal monies. Of course, Child Nutrition Fund is federal money, but it's another revenue stream altogether. That's a whole other deal. So we're not talking about the cafeteria fund, child nutrition program, when we talk about federal funding. Okay? Think of federal funding toward your general fund as this. It is filling in the gaps. It is taking care of those who cannot take care of themselves. It is speaking for the people who can't speak for themselves. It's taking care of the weaker, if you will. I'm not talking about weak of mind. I'm not talking about weak of spirit. I'm talking about financially weaker. Okay. People in your school, Head Start, that sort of thing. There are other programs, that are part of it too. Used to be the Great Society programs of Lyndon Johnson, and that went on through the 60s and 70s. And in the early 2000s, we had No Child Left Behind, and some money was infused into these things. In the early 70s, we had special education is huge. A huge amount of your federal dollars come into from special education. Probably at least half of your federal dollars are going to be special ed dollars almost every time. Okay, if you're in a larger district that has quite a bit of special ed, as much as 20 cents on the dollar of all of your funds are going to come in from special ed. And there are ways to make a bunch of money for your district through special ed. Special ed is also extremely expensive to fund. So there's been resistance to special ed. People didn't want to serve their kids. We can't do that. It costs too much money. Well, that's why we have weights in the funding formula. That's why we get special ed money from the state, and we get money from the feds. We get it from two different sources. I don't fall on that side of the equation. If a kid gets caught in my net, he's my kid. I don't care what the disability is. We serve that child to the best of our ability, and if it costs us a lot of money, then we search for the other levers to pull to get us the money that we need, and they do exist. If you're administrators, and you are future administrators, if you choose to find those levers, you can find them. There's federal money available, and there's state money available to serve your kids. Just serve your kids, okay? Now, special education was a big deal. Special education was what got No Child Left Behind passed. The liberals who were for special education and the conservatives who thought every kid needed to be tested exactly the same and all that. You remember all that stuff. Test them, test them, test them, test them. The special ed people, led by like Teddy Kennedy in the Senate, said, look, if you'll fully fund special ed, we'll go with you on this other stuff. Even though we don't like it, we'll go with it because special ed has been woefully underfunded for years and years, since the early 70s. And so they said, sure, we'll do that. And then they never did. Okay? So special ed funding on a per student basis is actually lower today than it was 15 years ago. Yet, the kids keep coming. Okay? And there are new things that we didn't even think about 15 years ago, like autism, things like that. So as there are more kids in the system, we get more money, but on a per capita basis, a per child basis, we actually get less money per child than we got 15 years ago. So that's kind of a shame. Okay? So there are lots of things we can get federal money for. Migrant kids, ESL kids, things like that. Okay? ESL kid, you can get federal money. It's $80 a kid. That's all it is. Okay? $80 a kid. You can't even apply for that money unless you have 100 kids. So you have to get a partner school or 2 or 10 to get any of that money. So if you only have 10 or 15 kids, you're going to get $800,000. You're probably not going to apply. That's wrong-minded. It's your money. It goes to those kids. If you could buy me anything, make the application. Things like Gear Up. You can get grants and things through Gear Up. They can get things for your teachers and things for your kids. That's all federal money. Okay. If you just do the minimum, then it's minimal money. If you go to school on it and you work hard and you see who your kids are and see what they can qualify for, you can double that money. You really can. I've done it. I can show you how. But that's really it for federal money. Okay? You have to show need. You have to show want to, and you have to do some follow through. Okay? Spend the money first. Gamble on yourself. Bet on your kids. And then they'll pay you back. Live within your budgets. But the money is there. Okay. Having said all that, that's pretty much all we need to talk about on the federal end. Okay, let's switch gears. Okay, so what did Wayne's World do? We're gonna switch gears. We're gonna go into the formula. Okay, state appropriated funding comes to us. And, that's a big kahuna. That's where over half of our money comes from. Okay, is state appropriation. A lot of that is special ed money. A lot of that is gifted and talented money. It's tied in lots of different ways. But it comes through the formula. And we've had the formula since the 1017 days, basically. They redid the formula. We had a formula and it was weird, okay? And it was politicized even more than it is now, if you can believe that, okay? And some schools in Oklahoma were paid higher rates for their kids than other schools in Oklahoma were paid for. They were places mostly in western Oklahoma that had been neat little towns, and all of a sudden the industries and farming kind of dried up, and they all moved to town. They all moved to Oklahoma City or moved away, and those schools freaked out. And so the government said, well, we'll hold you harmless. We will keep paying you at your old rate for as long as we can. Okay? And they did that for a while. They were held harmless. And with the new formula, which came with 1017, they phased those folks out. So there's been a lot of schools in western Oklahoma kind of go away, and some are still fading. But you can go out there and you can see schools that have 150 kids in them. They have beautiful auditoriums and wonderful gymnasiums and fine arts centers, things like that. And that was because they were hold harmless. They had more money than they knew what to do with for years and years. And then all of a sudden, 20 odd years ago, in the late 80s, early 90s, that all began to go away. And they got treated like everybody else. And so now they have what everybody else has, but they still have these beautiful entities out there. These, unbelievable auditoriums and things like that. Just take a tour. It's amazing. Okay. So the present system is complicated. I'm just telling you, it's a system. And it's written down, and it doesn't change from year to year, okay? So it is infinitely better than it has ever been before, and I'm talking about ever being prior to 1017. It's not great now, okay? But it has been largely depoliticized, even though that keeps rearing its ugly head, and then we fight the same battles all over and over. I talked to a legislator the other day, and she said, I used to be for term limits. And she said that was the stupidest thing we ever did. She said because every day at the legislature is like Groundhog Day. And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, well, people come up with these great ideas that are unworkable, and we tell them why they're unworkable. We show them why they won't work. We give them all the good details, the real details, and they go, oh, okay, well, we can't do that. That doesn't make any sense. And then next year, a bunch of people get term limited. We get new legislators in there, and they say, hey, let's try to do this thing. And the very same thing that they batted down the year before as being a bad idea, they have to bat it down again because it's still a bad idea. But the new people don't know that it was batted down the year before. They don't know the reasons why. They just think it might work, and it won't work. Okay? So that's my 10 cents on term limits. Okay? We wanted to do that. We voted that in, and it hasn't worked well for us, and it hasn't worked well for education in general. In particular, education hasn't worked well. Having said that, it's still better than it was. Okay, so let's talk about state aid and the funding formula. Okay, the funding formula is a weighted formula. Okay. It's predicated on many factors that affect students on a daily basis, including but not limited to special education classification, poverty, whether or not they're free or reduced lunch, academic ability. You get more money for a kid if he's gifted and talented. You get more money for a kid if he's developmentally delayed or has a specific disability in special education. You get more money for a kid in the formula based on where he lives. If you have a great big district that is very sparsely populated, or they call that an isolation factor, costs you more to take a bus back and forth to get that kid. You get more money from that. If you're just little bitty, you get some money for that. Okay? If you have each grade level of a child, from pre-K up to seniors and beyond, you get a different funding level for those kids. Sometimes more, sometimes less, based on how old a kid is and what grade he's in. His age grade, his grade weight is what we call it. his grade weight. We'll talk about that more. Matter of fact, you may have an opportunity to do a project on grade weights. I'd recommend it. It's not bad, kind of easy. But it's an eye-opener, so it's important. Everything's important, doesn't have to be hard. Okay? This one's an easy one, and it will open your eyes. I'd recommend looking into it. But we'll talk about that later. So you get money through the formula, what we call state aid, based on all these factors, and they stack. So if I've got a kid who's in the 4th grade, he's worth an X number, okay? And he's in gifted and talented, it's worth a little bit more. And if he is poor, he's worth a little bit more. And if I'm in a great big district, 500 square miles. I used to be in a district that was 303 square miles. That's pretty big. And so I got money for this. Hey, what if my faculty is a bunch of people who are old? You know, they're veterans. Yeah, I get extra money for that. You see how that stacks up? Okay? And it all stacks up into a weighted factor, and it adds to your regular number. Okay? So a pre-K kid might be worth 1.25 or something like that. I'll talk to you about that. I've got a PowerPoint about that I'll stick in here. But bottom line, on top of that comes all this other stuff. And so I've actually had schools that had less than 500 kids in it, and I got funded for 1,100 kids because my kids were poor and we were isolated. And we counted our gifted and talented kids really tough, and we beat the bushes, and we got all our numbers right, and everybody filed a free lunch form that was eligible, and we made sure that we counted everybody who was homeless or ESL or whatever. And we maximized that. I call that mining the formula, and I'll talk to you more about that later. But basically, it is your duty as an administrator in the school to help your superintendent to get all of the accounting right. Most powerful person in the school, the site secretary, because they're the ones who check all these boxes. Okay, they are the ones who input all the data. And it's the responsibility of each district to do their student accounting accurately so they can collect the amount of money that they actually deserve. Okay? And you get money 11 months out of the year. From August through June, you get money. You get state aid. You don't get any in July. You get it 11 out of 12. You do not get it 12 out of 12. You have to spend it 12 out of 12, but you only collect it 11 out of 12. Do I need to repeat that again? You're going to go 1 month without getting any state aid, so budget accordingly. Now, the formula is the single most important thing that you can learn about school finance. We're just getting started in this class. I'm telling you, the formula is the most important thing that you can learn about school finance in this class. It matters. Knowledge of the formula enhances an applicant's application, since it shows a superintendent that the prospective principal understands the importance of knowing your students and getting the documentation right. I understand the formula. Hey, use my name. I had finance with Dr. Carruthers, and he taught me the importance of getting the documentation right. It might get you a job. I'm kind of known for being good at this stuff, believe it or not. So, for the sake of argument, let's say that the funding number in Oklahoma today is the same as it was in 2009. It's actually getting pretty close. It's getting back there, but it's not quite there. But let's just say it was, okay? So in 2009, the number was $3,222.40 per kid. That was the average student funding number. So that was if 1 was equal to 1, which is about a 4th or 5th grader, okay, they get about 1. Everybody else is more than that, but a 4th or 5th grader is about 1. But all you have to do is multiply the number of kids you have on the roll. Let's say you had 1,000 kids, because let's do the math easily. you get $3,222,400, right? No. It's important. It's the most important thing, but it's really not that simple, okay? There are lots of variables that go into the formula. We've talked about this a little bit. They make sense most of the time, but you have to think about it. All those factors that I was talking about a while ago, they matter. It's a weighted formula predicated on many factors, including special ed, poverty, academic ability, geographical location, school size, grade level, and other factors. So let's look at the grade weights. Grade levels are weighted based on the predicted cost of educating a student at any given grade level. They did a study. They figured this out. They know that a pre-K kid costs about 30% more to educate than, say, a kid in 4th, 5th grade, okay? So a pre-K kid is worth 1.3 times that, okay? A kindergarten kid costs even more, okay? That's 1.5. Now in 1st and 2nd grade, we can go up in our class size a little bit. They kind of know the drill. And so we dip back a little bit. Not all the way back down to pre-K, but we go back to 1.35. 4th through 6th, like I said, a 4th, 5th, 6th grader, that's one. That's at $3,222.40. They're just a kid, okay? They're just a kid. And 7 through 12, it goes back up to 1.2. It costs more to educate them, but frankly, they're less hassle. You can have larger class sizes. You know, they don't have class sizes for band. They don't have class sizes for sports. They don't have class sizes really for ag, things like that. Okay? You see what we're doing here? A kindergarten kid is worth 1.5 more times than a 4th grader is worth, according to the formula, or the weight on the formula scale. To compute this number, each child enrolled in an Oklahoma district is assigned a weight according to the grade that they are in. Have you ever had those grades in your school that were bubble classes? You got that one weird class that has twice as many kids as every other class? Well, that class is gonna make you more money till they get to 4th or 5th grade. 4th, 5th, 6th, boom, they don't make you any more money. So you actually lose money for those kids. If they come out of 3rd grade and into 4th grade, you're going to lose about 1/4 of a kid. Okay? And it can actually hurt a district in the short term. But, you know, they come on up and you get more money for them in high school. Okay? So you made extra money on them in the early grades, and then you're going to tail off in upper elementary school. It's based on what it costs to educate those kids. Okay? Again, everything stacks. So you start with the 3,222.40, okay? And you then stack the rest, extra grade weight, things like that on top of them, and their poverty, free lunch, ESL, gifted and talented. You stack all that up. You figure it out. You do the math. And it all becomes your weighted daily membership. Schools in Oklahoma used to be funded on their average daily attendance. And that was a horrible way to do it, because it didn't matter if a kid is at school or not today. You still have to have a book, and you still have to have a desk, and you still pay the teacher. Pardon me. So it was one of those deals. It wasn't fair. So when they did the new formula, they fund our kids based on ADM for the most part now. Some of the federal funds are still based on ADA, but that's just part of a formula. There are other factors that come in on that. We're not even going to worry about that. So there is a way that kids are worth more than one. Almost every kid is worth more than one. If it's a wealthy kid who's of average intelligence, not gifted and talented, not ESL, he might be worth just one. But that's rare. You know, he's not on free lunch, or he's not ESL, or he's not special ed, or whatever. Most kids are worth more than one. Oh, and if he's only in fourth, fifth, or sixth grade, then he might just be a one, but that's going to be fairly rare. It is very possible for some kids, for some schools, to get paid much more than what a kid is actually worth. Kids can make money for your district. Okay, I had a district that was a little bitty, and I got paid about 2.15 what they would have been worth if they were all equal to one. So I got paid for well over 1,100 kids, bigger than the neighboring district that was much larger than me, because we mined the formula closer. Okay, so if you had 1,000 kids and you were at that same 2.15 factor that I was at in my little school, you'd get paid for 2,150 kids. Okay, so and they bring that back to the 2,150 at the $3,222.40, and that is a bunch of money. Okay. Special ed weights are huge. A blind student, for example, is worth 3.8 what a regular student is worth. Now, they're rare. There aren't very many blind students. And believe me, you're going to spend more money for that kid, too. That's why the weight is there. But, if he was a blind kid and he was free lunch and he was in the 7th grade, and, you could be making, you could serve him for summers, which is only 16 days by federal definition. You could draw 6.7 times one for that child. Okay? So it's a big deal. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. And you want that number to be as high as you possibly can, because of what we've talked about now 3 or 4 times, your chargeables, okay? You've got to outrun your chargeables. You've got to outrun loss of students. You've got to outrun cuts in the formula, the funding formula. They cut the dollar amount for one, and that's how you lose your money. They say, well, we're going to cut it $50. We're going to cut it $70. And you lose that for every kid that you've got in the weighted scale. Okay? And you're going to lose your chargeables every year, 75 cents on the dollar. So you have to grow the formula a little bit every year to make this work. Okay? Okay. When it is in waves, like the chargeables are, okay, like gross production is, you have to be very careful, because like I said earlier, you're going to get your cut from the state of 75 cents on the dollar, and if they don't produce, then you're going to lose that money too. So it's a double whammy, okay? It's a feast and famine that we talked about earlier, okay? Now, I lost $450,000 one year in chargeables, okay, taken out of my state aid, and I didn't get the bulk of the $600,000 that I had been getting from gross production, which meant I absorbed over $1 million in cut that year, and that hurt. Ouch, that's a big double whammy, okay? There are a few schools in our state that don't get any state aid at all due to chargeables. If they are a gross production school, that's tough. That is tough. If they are an ad valorem school, then it's going to stay about the same unless a big factory closes and everybody moves away. That could happen. Okay, that could happen. But it is a big deal. It's a big deal. It's also a big deal to the school next door that wasn't in either one of those positions, because as they go out of the state aid, that means more money for everybody else. If they come back into state aid, that means less money for everybody else. So it's a seesaw effect for everybody, yin and yang, whatever you want to call it. But the pie stays the same size. It just depends on how many people come up to take a slice, okay, and how big the slices are. So, boy, there it is. State, local, and federal funding and the formula. Now, I'm going to put a PowerPoint on here that explains all this stuff about the funding formula even in more detail. Knock yourselves out. It's big stuff. It's good stuff. Take a look at the technical assistance document. Use it too. Look at Larry Lewis's book, and we'll keep this thing rocking and rolling. Come back and refer back to these videos as much as you can. School finance is hard. Okay, some of it's simple, some of it's a little more difficult. But what makes it hard is that it's fluid. It does change, and has a lot of moving parts, and it can be confusing. The good part is that most of the moving parts can be documented. You can go put your hand on them. You can see them. A kid equals a kid equals a kid. Okay, you know what grade he's in. You know if he's got special ed disabilities or not. You know if he's on IEP. Okay, you know what the kid's worth. The good part about it is this is a big deal, but you want to learn. Now, I was talking to you earlier, and I think I got cut off, but or changed the subject on myself. But I had a guy who's very ill, and he was the special programs guy, and he was teaching me how to do it. And I didn't like him very much, and I knew he didn't like me. We weren't close. He wasn't my mentor. And I asked him one day, he had spent all day trying to teach me about impact aid. And I said, hey, why are you doing this? I know you don't like me. I appreciate you doing it. I really do. But I know we're not really friends. He says, no, he says, we're not. He said, but you want to learn. And I know, and I may not be around all that much longer, and I don't want to take what I know to the grave with me, and you want to learn. And so I'm going to teach you. Well, it kind of knocked me over a little bit because I was kind of a jerk, you know. I'd rather been anywhere but with this guy because we didn't get along. But when he said that, that clicked with me that, yeah, you know, I do want to know. He does know. I can gain knowledge from him. We don't have to be best buddies. And I can learn everything I need to learn from him. And so thank God for that guy, because he taught me more than I'd ever known before. And he made it real for me because we were actually using our kids and touching, you know, our kids' futures with what we were doing. You know, we were doing our best for our kids. Now, having said that, he did pass away, you know, several months later. And guess who was left holding the bag to do this job? I ended up getting his job. And he was instrumental probably in seeing that happened. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know that was what was going to happen. But I thank God for that guy because he took a chance on me. I want to take a chance on you. I want to impart this knowledge to you. Okay? It's hard. I know it's hard. Okay? But we're going to get through this together. I'm here for you. I have no doubt that you're going to do well. And I will do everything I possibly can to make sure that that is true. The assignments that we're going to have in this class are reality based. Okay? We aren't going to do anything that doesn't have something to do with something you can go put your hands on in your school district. You'll count kids, you'll count teachers, you'll you'll look at a revenue stream and analyze it. You'll look at a budget. We'll talk about that some. But this is good stuff. And the more you know about it at the site level, the better you're going to be as an employee and as a partner for your superintendents. Okay? Too many principals in the state of Oklahoma have just kind of done the 3,000 foot overview of finance and did assignments that they could copy off one another and that sort of stuff. The people who learn it and understand it do great things. And the people who just kind of fly by it, pay lip service to it, they're not as sharp. And we all know who those folks are. I don't want you to be those folks. So let's do our best. God bless you. And I am here for you all the way through on this stuff. So that's it. That's the last video. And let's go get them.